Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, a special show-long look at the war on cancer. It starts with asking the right questions. Here in Qatar, the partnership, the technology that hopes to crack the cancer conundrum. And then the sharp end, cancer treatment, particularly in developing nations. We'll look at Pakistan, where the poor have benefited from a cancer hospital with a famous name behind it. So, convention goes out the window this week here on Counting the Costs. No euro debt, no bailouts, no downgrades. Instead, we are looking at cancer, the illness that they say touches everyone in some way, eventually. What we're doing, though, is stepping back from the illness itself and looking at the business and the treatment, because it is a disease that comes at a great cost. We're talking financially, but personally, of course. And we're interested in what is being done to bring those costs down. We'll do that in a number of ways. Later on, a report from Pakistan on how those who can't afford treatment are finding some relief. Also, two experts go head-to-head, one from pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline, the other from the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas. But we're actually going to begin here in Doha at the Weill Cornell Medical College, and an example of one of the most exciting new areas of cancer research, genetics. Now, you're going to hear these phrases a lot in this coming story that we've put together. Genomes, genomics, the Human Genome Project. What it essentially boils down to is the sequencing of human DNA, putting it in some sort of order with the objective of finding the disease-causing genes. Now, what's crucial for us on this program is how dramatic the advances in technology have been and how much they're bringing down the cost of cancer research. Have a look at this. Albert Einstein famously said, "Once you stop learning, you start dying." Two things the scientists at Weill Cornell Medical College in Doha want nothing to do with. Their cancer research department is humming, not just with machinery, but the buzz of potentially changing and cheapening the cost of research. And it's in the genomics department where we find Dr. Joel Malik.
These different machines and how far, in the space of what, 10, 12 years, how fast this has moved. What's this one, first of all?
So this is called capillary technology, and this was the technology that was used on the original Human Genome Project. It went within 5 years from being something that would have taken. I remember when I was young and about 15 years ago, doing the calculations, and I remember thinking if every lab in the world worked for about 100 years, we'd be able to attack the human genome. But this technology was developed within a period of about 7 years, and it's what was used on the Human Genome Project. They had about 200 to 300 of these running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about a year and a half to decode the first human genome.
So to do one thing, we're talking hundreds of machines.
Hundreds of machines. It was like a football field full of these machines at one of the places called Solera, and likewise for the public projects in both the UK and the US, hundreds of them running constantly.
Okay, and then we graduated.
Yeah, we graduated. This was among the first of what was called next generation sequencing technology. Yeah. And this allowed us to do a human genome within probably a period of about a month, and at a cost of about $50,000, $60,000.
As opposed to
$3 billion, which
$3 billion?
$3 billion is what the original Human Genome Project cost. That's right.
So how do you get that much of a slide in such a short space of time?
And for miniaturization.
Okay.
So miniaturization. So originally we actually had to take every single piece of DNA that we wanted to decode and stick it into a bacteria to grow up lots of copies of it to be able to study it. And that's the technology that was used in this machine. What we did in this technology was essentially virtualize that, where we could put the DNA, do the amplification of the DNA and the studying of the DNA essentially outside of any cell, do it on a glass slide, and do hundreds of millions at a time. And it's parallelization and miniaturization. That's what allowed us to move to this stage.
And the current stage?
And the current state of the art is this technology over here.
HiSeq.
It's called the HiSeq 2000, yeah, HiSeq 2000, and it's essentially an improvement over that technology I just showed you. And what this does is it simply improves the surface areas that we're looking at, better cameras, better lasers, that sort of thing, better fluidics, all of that. The improvements that we've seen in cameras has been applied to this technology, and this allows us to do a human genome in about a day right now. although we have to sort of run it out longer, usually to get very high quality. But the goal is within 6 months we'd be able to do a human genome within about 24 hours. And actually, I was at a company beforehand that was developing next generation sequencing technology. The government, from its heavy investment in the science, was able to, sort of on the peripheries, fund lots of companies to help develop these technologies. And we wouldn't be here if the company that developed that technology or the company that developed this technology had not seen the benefit of putting their scientists' efforts and development efforts into developing that. That's what allows us to get to a genome for $1,000.
Well, okay, so does it surprise you?
But then comes perhaps the most important bit, the collaboration. Because down the corridor is Dr. Rafi Tabrizi, who uses Dr. Malik's research, turns it into something tangible for his patients.
The technology allows you to target things a lot
so
better.
there's two concepts actually. The first one is what you said, which is targeted. So we characterize the tumor and then we can specifically target the tumor. The second one is personalized, which means that your tumor might not be the same than mine. So we can have both a different targeted therapy. So your therapy would still be targeted to your tumor, and my therapy would be targeted to my tumor, which is very different of a broad targeted therapy. Yeah. And you can see here what happened in ovarian cancer as it diagnosed at an advanced stage. You have secondary, it spreads all over, and here is next to the tumor. But if you go upper in the abdomen, and here you have the liver, so it's really high in the abdomen. On the right side, you can see secondary lesions everywhere. So that brings in two major problems. The first one is how extensive the surgery is. So can I remove all of this without really impacting the morbidity of the patient? And the second aspect is, and that's where we kind of collaborated with Joel and answered the question, is how different is this primary tumor where most of the efforts of characterizing have been compared to these metastatic lesions, because at the end of the day we remove all of this and the patient will have a recurrence. So the tumor coming back in the abdomen because the primary is not here anymore.
So this, I mean, it's an awful subject we're having to deal with, but it must be satisfying for you, the fact that you're working on the back-end technology and it has a result.
That's right. Genomics out of the context of a disease or a real, a real interesting project like this is just sort of technology development, which for the first quite few years it really was. But it's really exciting to see it now being pushed out, what I call philanthropic genomics, where we're looking for areas where it hasn't been applied. It's sort of out of the universe of genomics itself. We're now moving it into places where it should be applied, but hasn't quite yet been. For example, possibly into diagnosis or prognosis, one or the other, and applying it to something like ovarian cancer, where it traditionally hasn't been applied.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating talking to those two doctors, so committed to what they're doing and to working together to make a difference. What they are doing, in a way, goes back about 40 years now, the time that the then US President Richard Nixon declared the war on cancer. And the progress has really been quite significant. In the United States, for example, the most common type of childhood leukemia, which was once basically a death sentence, now has a 5-year survival rate of 90%. The death rate for cancer patients aged 0 to 4 has decreased 80.2% since 1950. And the drop in overall cancer mortality has prevented about 767,000 deaths over the past 20 years. That is a really telling number. But now look at what it's cost. A single treatment of the advanced melanoma drug Yervoy cost $30,000, $120,000 for the 4-dose course. And what that reflects is the enormous cost of developing these drugs. It takes an average of $1.3 billion, not to mention 10 to 15 years to bring a drug to market. And that doesn't include the massive number of drugs that never even make it that far. In fact, only 5% of cancer treatments that show promise before human trials are ever approved. The remaining 95% of possible drugs fail at various stages of the process. Which shows you how early in a very long process our two doctors' work is. What they have done is only the very first step, an intuition, discovery, if you like, about a type of cancer. Then it becomes about finding if it's safe, how effective it is, how it breaks down in the body. They call this the preclinical stage. And then only if all that works come the clinical trials, the phases, different phases as well, safety, efficacy, therapeutic effect. And then that all requires the cooperation we talked about. Basic research often happens at the universities, preclinical stuff often with the biotech companies. These are the small drug companies focusing on discovery. the later stage will only happen, this is commercialization, only happen with the big pharmaceutical companies later on. So there's, as you see, a structure in place. So what is the future of cancer research? How can we ultimately make it more affordable? Two guests to discuss that today. In Philadelphia is Dr. Paolo Pauletti, who is the President of Oncology at GlaxoSmithKline, and in Houston is Dr. Ronald DePino, who is the President of the MD Anderson Cancer Center. And we thank you both gentlemen for joining us on Counting the Cost this week. I'd like to go to Philadelphia first and talk to you, Dr. Pauletti from GlaxoSmithKline, about the cost. We call this program Counting the Cost. Why is it that a course of cancer drugs is up in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars? What is it that makes it so expensive?
It is very important to remember what does it mean to discover and develop a drug. From the formulation of an hypothesis, the identification of a target, and with the target I mean where we can interfere in the biological process to stop the evolution of the disease or to interfere with the evolution of the disease. After that, we need to develop a drug that can become a medicine. And it could be a small molecule, which can become a tablet or an IV formulation, or can be what we call a biologic, which means that we need to develop a substance in an extremely complex way, like a humanized antibody. You need to engineer cells to produce that. You can have transdermal patches, or you can have vaccine. When this has been identified, you need to validate your hypothesis in preclinical model, and then after that we need to understand if the medicine, how the medicine is metabolized in the human body, and again you do this through preclinical model. And finally, after a long period of time, you arrive to the first time in humans, and you need to validate your hypothesis in humans. What I'm trying to say that it's a very complex process. Yeah, it's a very complex process. It takes 10 years, and in average, the cost of $1 billion. Now,
how do you make it cheaper for the
has
people in
taken
the
a
end?
very
Though?
strong
This is,
position.
sorry to interrupt you. The end game is for sufferers themselves who are going through enormous suffering themselves and then have all this financial burden as well.
Well, there are two aspects. One, we need to be better in discovering and developing the drug and make the process efficient. On the other side, our position is that we need to provide to society medicine that have value. And when I say value, innovation needs to be linked to an important improvement of what it is a standard of care today. If our medicine has a small increment or it is what we call a Me Too drug, we should not be rewarded. If we do something important with such a complex process and to continue to reinvest in innovation, I think that innovation needs to be rewarded in a responsible way, and we want to be responsible within society.
Dr. DePino in Houston, if I can bring you in here. We've been talking there with Dr. Pauletti about the front end, I guess, the business end where the patients are concerned. In the back end, things like genetic sequencing and these sorts of things, as we've seen from our own reports, the cost has gone down. The cost of research and doing all of these things is coming down here. I mean, this is a good thing, obviously, and it should, I guess, in the long run, be able to pass down the chain.
I think that that's a point well taken, but just to return to the discussion and the point that was just made, it's very important to appreciate that this is a very complicated process, and essentially the cancer drug development ecosystem, going from academia to biotech to large pharma, is broken, as reflected in the fact that there's a 95% failure rate for drugs entering into the clinic. That is 19 out of 20 drugs entering in. If you ask why we're failing, part of that relates to the fact that we, quite frankly, did not know enough to this point. That is to say that there is a lot about cancer that was hidden from view, and as a result, we did not truly understand which targets to go after and how to develop drugs against those targets and select the right patients for those drugs. That has changed. It has changed very quickly, and there is a transformative series of technologies that will now put us on a firm plane. But more fundamental is the fact that the interactions across all of the different components in drug development needs to be optimized. There needs to be a greater emphasis on understanding the targets, understanding how to develop drugs against those targets, and understanding how to prosecute those drugs in clinical trials.
So is
what
it
has
that there's
occurred
not,
in the past
so sorry
is
to
that
interrupt you, sir. Is it that there's not enough collaboration and not enough cooperation between the drugs companies, between the doctors, between the researchers, between the genetic sequencers, bringing that all together and actually getting you all talking off the same page?
I think that that's in part the case. There has been collaboration, but the types of collaboration, the types of organizational constructs need to be optimized. Currently, biotech is essentially charged with the responsibility of moving discoveries from academia to the doorstep of large pharma, which can then bring it across the commercialization goal line. Biotech is configured in a way where it is designed to try to support their drug development efforts as opposed to eliminate what might be would-be failures, because after all, they want to create the perception of value in the programs that they have. What we need to do is to design preclinical efforts that will cull those would-be failures. And there, MD Anderson is playing a major role in establishing more robust activities at the front end so that we can reduce the enormous rate of failure at the back end and therefore reduce the cost of cancer drug development. So the only answer at this point is science and developing the right kinds of organizational constructs.
Dr. Parletti, looked like you want to say something there. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I guess Dr. De Pino really is highlighting important point, but I want to also to give some optimistic direction of the discussion. The science is transforming, as Dr. De Pino said, at the speed of the light. And we do have example recently of a more intelligent drug development and discovery. Just to mention the development of the BRAF inhibitor in melanoma, where we have identified a specific target, we selected the patient with a specific biomarker in the first time in human. We have also identified mechanism of resistance, and now we are combining two drugs, and this is something that GSK is pursuing, the MEK combination and the BRAF combination. I don't want to go in the technical details, but we are combining two drugs based on the profound knowledge of the biology of the resistance, selecting patient from the beginning now. And here is an important point. While the science is evolving in a certain way, for example, the regulation is not following at the same pace. Though we have having conversation with the FDA, with the CHMP, and they have understood that, but we don't have the new regulation that are adapting to the evolution of the science of precision medicine. I also want to make a comment on the collaboration. Yes, we need to optimize this collaboration. And in a moment of financial crisis, by the way, we need to be sure that the money is put in where there is innovation. And I can give you again an example that we are collaborating, for example, with another pharmaceutical company, Novartis, where we are combining two drugs. So Dr. De Pino is right, needs to be improved, but I see that we are going in the right direction. We are having conversation with the regulatory agency, and if the rules are changed, we will have a more effective way to develop drug, hence at lower cost, because we need to understand that the era of the blockbuster is over, especially in oncology, where you can find a drug that can be active only in 5% of patients with lung cancer, for example. So we cannot have enormous cost of development. It doesn't make any sense. So by developing the right drug for the right patient, the cost should be less, and the cost to society will be less.
Right. Dr. De Pino, I've got 60 seconds left. Quick reply from you.
Well, there is indeed, I agree, there is indeed a historic confluence of technologies that has transformed our ability to understand cancer to a level that we can now begin to think in terms of cure. Not just advances in sequencing, but advances in artificial intelligence, advances in the ability to manipulate genes, to create animal models that are refined model systems for testing drugs that will enter into human clinical trials, and so on. We have to recognize, however, that there is tremendous pressure in R&D in academia with the very significantly decreased pay lines for research grants in academia, that there is, in fact, tremendous pressure in biotech, which is not configured for success, and the fact that large pharma has largely shifted its R&D resources to late-stage clinical development and commercialization.
Okay.
So again, if you look at the ecosystem, I do have a high degree of optimism, but there's much work to be done.
Dr. Ronald DePino there, the president of the MD Anderson Cancer Center, and also Dr. Paolo Paoletti, president of oncology at GlaxoSmithKline. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. There is, of course, a whole other end to this story, and that is the people who don't have access to treatment and at the huge costs we outlined earlier probably never will. Our case study is in fact Pakistan, but I kind of want to work our way there backwards to show you that success in cancer treatment has its pitfalls everywhere. In the United States, for example, from 2003 to 2008, white women with breast cancer had a 5-year survival rate of 90.5%, while black women had a 77.7% rate. That's just within a country, and the disparity gets bigger when you compare wealthy and poor nations. UK, for example, there are 504 incidences of cancer per 100,000 people and around 181 deaths. Compare that to Africa, where there are 118 cases per 100,000 people and 93 deaths. Of course, there are fewer cases of cancer in Africa because people, broadly speaking, don't live as long there. The bottom line for developing nations is that advanced therapies aren't available. Few people have the supportive care to undergo even basic chemotherapy, which is highly toxic, even for someone with the right support or right constitution even. Anyway, here's the case study we mentioned. Pakistan, we're focusing on the Shaukat Khanum Memorial Hospital, brainchild of cricket legend turned politician Imran Khan. In a country where 150,000 cancer cases are reported every year, this hospital is, for many, the only hope. Kamal Haider takes up the story for us.
It's another busy day at the Shaukat Khanum outpatient department as people wait their turn to meet the doctor, young and old, men and women. The hospital receives 400 to 500 patients every day from all over the country. Cancer treatment is expensive business around the world, and especially if you live in a country like Pakistan where most people live below the poverty line, they cannot afford it. Therefore, facilities such as Shaukat Khanum provide even the poor a ray of hope. Almost 75% of the patients here cannot afford the high cost of cancer treatment.
Shaukat Khanum stands for high quality care with access to everyone, especially the poor. Focus on education, both of healthcare professionals as well as others, and also research. These four threads make up what our mission is.
Shahzeb has been receiving treatment for blood cancer for the past 2.5 years and is showing signs of recovery. In a country where cancer meant a death sentence for the poor, there is now some hope.
My son was suffering from blood cancer, and I was not able to afford its cost. But one day I visited Shaukat Khanum and found it a blessing for my son, who was under treatment here for the last 2 years, free of charge. He has recovered a lot.
Not long ago, most people went to India or Singapore to get a scan, but this purpose-built hospital is now equipped with the latest state-of-the-art equipment. Almost 10,000 patients are treated here every year. The hospital plans to expand its capacity and build more such facilities around the country. In a poor country like Pakistan, this hospital has given new hope to many with cancer and set an example for the region. Kamal Haider, Al Jazeera, Lahore.
So there you go, our special look at the fight against cancer, indeed the business that goes on behind the scenes to make sure more and more lives are saved. And we want to pay special tribute to Max Neeson, our producer, who came up with the whole idea for this show and put in so much of the groundwork. Max has actually just finished his time with us. He's headed back to the United States, but you'll see his Twitter details on screen right now. if you've got any questions for him or thoughts from him on this show. Similarly, if you want to get in touch with us, here's how you do it. You can send a tweet to either me at Kamal AJE or our business editor at Abid Oliver Ali. Our email address is up there too as well, counting the cost at aljazeera.net. And while you're online, you can head to aljazeera.com/business, link on to the CTC page. We put all our episodes up there, including this one, in full for you to catch up on whenever you'd like. But that is it for this special edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.